Hogwarts Legacy is just a few months away, and the team at Avalanche Software surprised us all with a huge gameplay showcase featuring combat, our first look at the HUD, and tons of incredible scenes from in and around Hogwarts. Hey there friends, it's Codiak here, welcome to Legacy Gaming. Today we're checking out 10 huge new highlights from Hogwarts Legacy. If there's one thing we all know, it's that Hogwarts is a school for young witches and wizards, and as such, one of the most common questions about Hogwarts Legacy is how will classes work within the game? While there is a day-night cycle, the game won't force you to attend class on a given schedule. You won't need to be in charms by 9 AM or anything like that. Instead, classes will act as important moments along the main story. This will be one of the primary ways players will develop and learn new spells, so it's an essential part of the gameplay, but the developers didn't want to force players to experience that aspect of the game within any sort of time restraints. There will also be side quests that tie into various classrooms, and that's an important thing to keep in mind because, as I just said, learning new spells is often tied directly to classroom activities. Does this mean players will also be able to learn new spells through various side quests? We don't know yet, but what I can say with some certainty is that classes will play a huge part in the Hogwarts Legacy experience. One thing I noticed about the gameplay showcase was just how lived-in Hogwarts felt. This is often a sticking point for a lot of open-world games, but from what I've seen, Hogwarts Legacy sure does a good job of making the world feel alive. Throughout our brief tour of the castle, you can clearly see students everywhere. The developers didn't go into any details about their daily cycle or anything like that. This isn't a cyberpunk moment, but if you were worried that you'd be alone in a big, beautiful castle, rest assured there will be plenty of life in and around Hogwarts. What I came to realize while watching the showcase was truly how fully realized Hogwarts Legacy is. This is really going to be the world's first ever complete experience in the Harry Potter universe, and given that it's only taken us 25 years to get to this point, it's pretty incredible. Not only are there fellow witches and wizards running around, but the idea of magic and mystery just permeate everything, and you get a real sense of that as you explore different parts of the castle, something I'm sure lore fanatics will latch onto even more once they're in control of their own character. While not featured during the gameplay showcase, one thing I wanted to talk about was the Flu network. For the very first time, we got a sense for how the Flu or fast travel system will connect the world of Hogwarts Legacy. Simply put, there are a lot more fast travel locations than I thought there would be, and I think that's actually a great thing. In terms of scale, Hogwarts is massive, and running around the castle could easily be considered a chore, but I think the Flu network is really going to help cut down on that hassle. Let's just be real for a second. At some point, players will stop being enchanted by every corner of Hogwarts and will want to jump into some sort of action, and that's really where the Flu network comes into play. When the magic of the world starts to wear off, the fast travel system is there to ensure players don't get frustrated by the scale of the game. In the showcase, players would simply have to run close to the Flu network point and it would unlock. A nice little quality of life feature that I'm sure many will appreciate. Sadly, we didn't get to see the animation or the world map tied to the Flu network outside of the minimap, but even there, when a Flu point is activated, it appears for you to see. I'm excited about this system. I know not everyone loves fast travel, but you have to balance quality of life with immersion, and Flu is the perfect way to handle fast travel in a Harry Potter game. A big part of the Hogwarts Legacy showcase was an in-depth look at the character customization tool. Now, in most games, I'm less inclined to get excited about creating a character, but considering this is the first time we're creating those custom witches and wizards in a world we've never fully explored, it's a bit of a big deal. Players will be greeted with a wide array of preset options to choose from. Consider this the base from which you'll be able to customize further through the additional menus. Once you select your preset, you'll be able to manipulate other options such as face shape, skin color, and glasses. The developers made sure to point out that additional glasses and face coverings could be unlocked in the game. In the next menu, you'll be able to adjust hairstyle and hair color. This isn't segmented into male or female options, just one big list for you to choose from. Next, you'll have the option to tweak your complexion as well as your character's freckles and moles, which are subtle changes but noticeable. You'll also be able to pick from one of 9 scars and markings that you can apply to the face of your character if you so choose. The last cosmetic choices have to do with your character's eyes and eyebrows, both of which have a decent number of options. The final details are a bit interesting. You'll have the option to choose from one of 2 voice options, and then use a pitch modifier to tweak the tonality of the voice. A really cool feature I don't think I've ever seen in another game. You'll also have to choose your difficulty from one of 4 presets. It's important to note that the game does feature a story mode. The tooltip reads, "A focus on story with minimal gameplay challenges," so if you are a casual fan looking to experience Hogwarts Legacy without a whole lot of challenge, there's that option for you. Finally, you'll name your character and choose which dorm your character will reside, either witch or wizard. While not entirely surprising, choosing your house is a decision that resides outside of the character customization process. We actually talked about this in a recent Hogwarts Legacy video, so check that out if you want to get an early jump on your adventures in Hogwarts. One thing that surprised me just a bit about the Hogwarts Legacy gameplay showcase was the way side quests are being handled within the game. It's all a bit par for the course. As you're running around the world, there are NPCs that will offer you different side activities to take on. In the showcase, we saw 2 examples of how this could play out. One of the examples had us talking to Nellie Ogspire. There's a bit of a back and forth, which is cool, allowing the player to respond and dig a little deeper into the backstory of the situation. I think diehard RPG fans are really going to enjoy this because it just adds to the overall sense of world building. This particular side quest tasks the player with finding Daedalian keys, which according to the quest unlock hidden cabinets around the castle, presumably filled with some sort of loot. The second side quest we saw in the showcase played out in much the same way, at least to start. We interact with an NPC, this time Zenobia Noke, and go back and forth quite a bit. There aren't a ton of dialogue options, but the options you do have stretch across the moral spectrum. Some responses are kind and genuine, others snarky and a bit Malfoyish. It's a neat way to further give your character a sense of personality through every interaction. This side quest tasks the player with finding 6 gobstones scattered around Hogwarts, on the surface presenting as a simple search and find quest. The developers also talked about side quests being tied to various classrooms. We touched on this before, but let's crack this open just a bit more. We know that classroom activities will be the key to learning new spells and furthering our magical abilities. If that's the case for all classes, then side quests associated with classroom activities could be an optional way to build out your arsenal of spells. We didn't actually see this in action, but it was pretty much confirmed directly from the developers during the showcase. Of course, we've seen all manner of side activities through the various trailers and previews, including interactive puzzles, secrets, and whatever comes to pass in the Room of Requirements. But the devs did say there was a point they just had to stop creating new things for players to do. For example, wizard chess isn't part of the game. It's mentioned and part of the lore, just not a side activity, but from the looks of things, there will be plenty to keep us busy. One small thing the developers talked about were essential spells. Just to the top left of the spell interface are a few tiny icons, and the one to the left here represents one such essential spell, Revelio. This is something the devs wanted players to have access to throughout the entire game and was showcased a number of times throughout the demo. This particular essential spell allows the player to interact with various secrets around Hogwarts. As you're running around the castle, you'll notice these almost ethereal-looking pages. These are places you can cast Revelio, revealing a secret. See how that shakes out? During the showcase, only Revelio and a spell grid were available, but I would imagine 2 more essential spells will be added to this menu, judging by the open spots up and down on the D-pad. My guess is that one will be Lumos, but I can't for the life of me think what the other could be. If you have any guesses as to what that other essential spell is, let me know in the comment section below. If there's one thing that gets me excited about a new game, it's the user interface. And I know that's a bit lame, but hear me out. The UI reveals so much about a game, and if you're able to get a glimpse at the menus, oh baby, now we're talking. In this showcase, we got a chance to look at both, which means we've got a lot to talk about. Let's start in the bottom right, because this is easily the most interesting part of the UI, your spell menu. By holding down R2, the player has access to 4 spells on demand. You see that each spell has a different color, red, yellow, purple, and silver, and each of those spells relates to a different school of magic. While not shown, the developers did reveal that players would be able to unlock multiple pages of spells, which means during combat, you'll have the option to quickly toggle between pages, giving you access to different spells to cast. If we journey up into the left just a bit, well, that's that essential spell section we just talked about. As we can see, Revelio is available as well as a grid. According to the developers, that grid opens up the slottable spells menu, revealing all the spells a player has access to. As you might expect, they weren't ready to reveal this quite yet, but did confirm there are over 20 slottable spells in Hogwarts Legacy. Below that, we see 2 icons and 2 bars. On the bottom is the player's health bar. To the right of that is your potion indicator, letting you know how many health potions you have available. Above that is an ancient magic meter. We haven't seen this in action just yet, but we have seen the bar fill up during combat, which leads me to believe that once a player fills the bar, they'll be able to cast some pretty powerful magic, potentially even one of the unforgivable curses. We actually have a pretty cool video talking about the darker side of Hogwarts Legacy, so if you're into that sort of thing, check it out when you get some time. If we slide over to the left side of the screen, we see a couple different things. The first is our active quest. It looks like we can hold up on the D-pad to enter our quest menu, possibly allowing us to set an active quest. Below that, we get our first look at the mini-map. We can see a number of icons on the fringes of the map, with our active quest leaving a golden trail to follow as we move around the world. We haven't seen the full map just yet, but my hope is that it looks something like the Marauders map, which would go a long way here with the fans. The last little bit of UI goodness is just to the right of the mini-map. What exactly this is, we don't know entirely, but the devs did say it has something to do with magical tools, things that the player will need outside of their arsenal of spells. Now, if we shift gears, we can take our first look at the Hogwarts Legacy menu, or field guide as they're calling it in the game. We see so many interesting things on the screen, but let's really break it down. On top, we've got our character level, which indicates a traditional RPG-style leveling system. If we go clockwise, we of course have an option to view our full map. Next is our quest menu, and by the looks of things, there are no currently active quests at this point in the showcase. Moving along, we have Owl Post, which is a bit interesting. It's a single-player game. It's not like we'll be sending mail to one another like we would in an MMO, so what does Owl Post mean? This could just be a clever way for the game to send you bits of lore or possibly even items. It would make sense given how owls are used within the scope of the books and the movies, but it's still unclear within the game. If we keep trudging along, we have settings. Plenty we'll be able to dive into at some point. Straight at the bottom of the menu are challenges. This is a really interesting aspect of the game that developers spent a good amount of time talking about. Within challenges are 5 categories: combat, quests, exploration, field guide pages, and the Room of Requirements. It's easiest to think of these like achievements. As you complete the various challenges, you'll unlock the achievement, and those accomplishments will be tied to additional XP gains, but it's unclear if challenges unlock additional things such as items or cosmetics. We just don't know at this point. Like most achievement-style systems, completing some of these challenges will just happen as you play the game, whereas others will most likely take you off the beaten path as you explore other optional content within the world. For example, we saw a player use a spell to snatch a field guide page that was floating around. I have to believe there are dozens of those flapping around different parts of the world. Now, tied to challenges is the next menu option, Collections. Based on the picture of a wizard studying, I have to guess this is some sort of lore repository, a place for players to learn more about the things that they collect and see during their adventures. It's a wild guess, but makes the most sense in this style of RPG environment. Back on our menu screen, we also see an option for talents. We've actually seen the 5 talent trees in a previous trailer and know the name of at least 3 of them: Core, Room of Requirements, and Stealth. We haven't gone any deeper into this system yet, but as you might expect, it's something we're very interested to learn more about. Next on our list, we have Inventory, which indicates we'll have a way to store all sorts of items we find during our adventures. Finally, Gear, which I would guess is a pretty standard RPG loadout screen. What trips me up here is the actual items themselves. I guess it makes sense to unlock different sets of robes, but what else? I can see hats being tied to some sort of stats, but I can't imagine hands, legs, or feet really making that much sense within the game. It'll be interesting to see how the Hogwarts Legacy team handles loadouts and gear in general. We have seen some different cosmetic options during some of the previous trailers, but how gear impacts gameplay and stats, well, that's what I care about the most. Like I said, there's a lot we can learn from the menus, but sadly, still a lot of unknowns that we can't quite define. Of course, that's by design, but it just means we'll have to speculate a bit longer until the truth is revealed. We can't finish our conversation today without talking about combat. Man, oh man, we finally know the basics of wizard fighting, and I'll admit, it's a bit more familiar than I was expecting. Now, I don't want to go into all the details, that would take another 6 minutes. I know because we actually put together an in-depth video covering Hogwarts Legacy combat, so if you really want to deep dive, go check out that video. What I do want to cover though are the basics. First and foremost, there is such a thing as a basic attack. Tapping your R2 button sends out what the devs call a basic shot, and these are used to create combinations, bridging the gap between your major spells. At any given time, players will have access to 4 major spells via the quick cast menu. These are customizable, and the developers said that more pages would be unlockable, eventually giving you access to up to 16 on-demand spells. Each spell is associated with a different school of magic, and that matters because other witches and wizards you fight will employ shields that you'll have to break. It's a simple matching scenario. If a shield is purple, you'll need to use a purple spell to break it. After that, the enemy is exposed, and everything you cast after that point will deal damage to the target. Players will also have to manage those 2 resources we talked about before, health and that ancient magic. What that does, we still don't know, not yet, but it's my guess that it will let you tap into the most powerful magic within the game. To be honest, it's just great to finally see the fast-paced, cooldown-driven system in action. It's a much more familiar system than I was expecting, and I think a lot of players will be able to pick this up with little to no learning curve. In my opinion, the developers are smart, making the system more accessible, not trying to create something so unique that it's clunky or even unwieldy for more casual players. The cool thing is, now that we have a sense for how combat works in the game, we can go back and look at other combat showcased in previous trailers and really understand how it all works together. If you actually count, there are a number of spells we've seen in action, all of which will be slottable spells players can unlock sometime during the game. We couldn't end the video until we looked at some of the things the devs chose to merely dangle in front of us. In terms of open world, again, we're told if we can see it, we can go there. We were shown at least 3 different locations in the distance: the Owlry, the Forbidden Forest, and Hogsmeade. We know a good amount around Hogsmeade. I mean, we've seen it in other reveals, but the devs pushed the Forbidden Forest specifically towards the end of their showcase. We've seen some curious footage from this setting, but only a few pictures and quick clips. It'll be a critical location for players as it's such a foundational setting in the books and movies. As it was teased here at the end, it would make sense that this is the next thing covered in the showcase. Also quickly shown was the Owlry. There isn't much discussion around this, but we'll assume we'll see this play out as a quest location, or at the very least, something to do with lore or world building. The concept of being able to see some place and go there physically within the game is a huge selling point within open world games, and for most modern titles, it's true. I can't wait to see how all of these different locations tie together and ultimately create the tapestry that is Hogwarts Legacy. Since we're on the topic of traveling around the world, let's talk about flying. It has been confirmed that Quidditch is not part of Hogwarts Legacy, but we will still be able to grab a broomstick and explore the world. My question is, to what extent? Well, we're not exactly sure. We've only seen bits of footage flying through the Forbidden Forest and some racing, but hopefully we'll get something soon from the team to explore this further. The reason I bring this up is because during the showcase, we saw a number of students flying around Hogwarts on their brooms, which got my brain thinking, man, I would love to know how we're going to fly in Hogwarts Legacy. So there you have it, 10 incredibly exciting highlights from the recent Hogwarts Legacy showcase. I'll be honest guys, this game just keeps looking better and better, and I'm not just saying that. Ask Livid, I'm one of the first to call BS on a bad looking game, but Hogwarts Legacy ain't it. I think world building is the key to success here. The systems don't have to be revolutionary because we've never been able to fully immerse ourselves within this world, and let's be honest, that's really what we all want to do. Do I think collecting floating field guide pages is an exciting system? No, I don't. But do I think I'm going to spend a good chunk of time running around Hogwarts like it was 1997 all over again? You better believe it. What's really important to keep in mind is the developers' transparency with the game. They believe in what they're creating. If they didn't, they wouldn't be so forthcoming with big chunks of gameplay. It's a breath of fresh air, especially in the age of cinematic trailers and hype building. The proof is in the pudding, and Hogwarts Legacy looks like it could be one of the most successful games of the new year. And speaking of which, this game, alongside over a dozen other titles, made our list for the most anticipated games of 2023. It's getting close to the end of the year, which means list videos are all the rage, so check out our 2-part video series on the 2023 games we think will truly shake up the industry. As always, friends, my name is Codiak, and from everyone here at Legacy Gaming, thanks for watching, and play on.